Welcome to episode 121 of the XS Noize Podcast. I'm Mark Millar. Thanks for listening. In this episode, I speak to Tidelines frontman Robert Robertson about their new album, An Ocean Full of Islands. If you missed the previous episode, I spoke to Nick Kershaw about his upcoming No Glitz, Just Hits UK tour.
Well, I was getting more and more nervous the closer it got to the day, because it was never when I agreed to do it, it was just a gig at Hammersmith Odeon or something. They were just going to do a gig in London to follow up the success of Band-Aid. And then I just saw it getting bigger and bigger, and then it was Wembley Arena, and then it was Wembley Stadium, and then there's massive TV audience, and it's going to happen in Philadelphia as well, and all these huge acts that I was going to be sharing the stage with. A lot of my idols and people are, had massive influence on me. So I was I was nervous as soon as I got up that morning. I remember we had to drive to Battersea helipad to get a helicopter to fly close to the stadium, because they weren't confident about traffic and whether we were able to get in and all that kind of stuff. So I don't remember being that I was obviously nervous and whatever, but I wasn't terrified until I actually stood by the side of the stage and realised what I was about to go and do. There were 3 stages. It was all in a circle, and there was supposed to be motors underneath the stage revolving the stages. There was a stage breaking down, there was a stage setting up, and there was a stage where the performer was performing. So I was standing on the stage that was setting up for the next act, waiting to go on stage, and I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. And it's just one of those occasions when someone announces and it's an out of body experience. Something makes you walk on stage, because if I'd had any sense, I probably wouldn't have, I said, no, I'm not going to do this. I've changed my mind. I don't want to do this. It was that scary.
So check it out. And if you like the podcast, please subscribe on your favorite listening platform, give us a rating and leave a comment. It helps us more than you know. If you want up-to-date music news, album reviews and interviews, then check out our main website at xsnoize.com. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Search for the tag at XS Noize Music. Here's XS Noize writer Daniel Lynch with a taste of what's been on the website this week.
In the review section, From Nothing to a Little Bit More is the second album from the Lathams. Stuart Evans says it enhances the trio's reputation as indie stars in waiting. 4 out of 5. Also in the review section, Michael Barron has been listening to Together All the Way from the Levelers Collective. The album is a reworking of some of the band's classic tracks, with 2 new songs also included. Daring and courageous, says Michael. And Rebecca Haslam has caught up with Billy Lockett to discuss how battling with addiction and close family loss inspired his latest album, Abington Grove. There's new music on the site from Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds and Roisin Murphy, who is signed with the Ninja Tune label. And Stiff Little Fingers have announced a headline show at Custom House Square in Belfast. Stay up to date at xsnoize.com.
Scottish band Tidelines have released their fantastic new album, An Ocean Full of Islands. I caught up with frontman Robert Robertson to talk about the new album, upcoming live shows and lots more. So sit back, relax and enjoy the XS Noize Podcast with Robert Robertson. Hi Robert, welcome to the XS Noize Podcast.
Hi Mark, yeah, thanks very much, glad to be here.
Absolutely great to have you. So I'd like to go back to the start. Can you remember the first band or artist that made you pay attention to music?
Right back to the very start when I was a young kid. I was brought up in the Highlands, and my mum and dad were both kind of into Scottish folk music. So it would, being totally honest, it would probably been a Scottish folk singer of some description. Like Stephen Quigg, I remember, was a guy who was going back and forth. You probably haven't heard that name, but just sort of local kind of Highland singers and things. That would have been what I was listening to back then, along with kind of my dad's sort of collection of kind of 60s rock and roll and stuff like that. So there was probably like Roy Orbison and that kind of stuff in there as well, and kind of folk stuff of that time, like your Bob Dylan's, Joan Baez, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So yeah, pretty. My first music that I listened to back then in my very, very formative years was probably quite old fashioned in many ways.
Yeah, well, I suppose it always starts off like that. I mean, I started off sort of Simon and Garfunkel from my dad, and obviously the Beatles and stuff like that there. But it's interesting what you're saying, you know, because obviously the folk side of it's continued on in your sound for Tidelines.
It has, yeah. I think the folk thing, Simon and Garfunkel, by the way, absolutely. That's another one of the names when I was a wee kid. I used to love Simon and Garfunkel. So growing up with that sort of stuff, I think folk music's never going to be far away from what we do. And coming from the West Highlands of Scotland, there's also that sort of slight Gaelic influence as well, which as Tidelines progresses is becoming slighter and slighter, to the point that in this album it's barely noticeable, but it's certainly still always going to be there because it's kind of who we are. But so yeah, I think that probably best describes my early musical influences.
Has music always wanted to be the career path that you wanted to follow, or did you have any other ambitions growing up?
Pretty much has been. I mean, like everyone else, like we kids, you're ambitious. At one point I wanted to play for Scotland in the World Cup one day, and mind you, I've got more chance of playing for Scotland than they do get the World Cup, right enough. But so you have all your ambitions, but no, I was always as ever since I was a wee kid, I used to play on like a ladle in the kitchen pretending it was a guitar, and so I've always wanted to be a singer, and all through school. I went to uni. I studied English literature down here actually in Glasgow, but always with a view to just getting that out of the way and starting a band and going for it.
So how did the band start? When did Tidelines get together?
2016, and myself and Ross, the keyboard player, we've been playing in some other various projects together, and the other two lads had also played together in various different capacities, but we didn't really know each other. Ross was the only guy that I knew, and we kind of met deliberately. Like we went on the lookout, Ross and I, for a drummer and a guitar player, electric guitar player, through the kind of Glasgow music scene, which is a totally vibrant scene. It's got everything from that sort of West Highland thing that I told you about right the way through to Gus's tradition. He's the drummer. He's much more mainstream. He's from kind of rock. His growing up, he was kind of, and he'd been playing in various rock bands for a few years before we sort of conjoined, and then we've got this kind of musical melting pot that was Tidelines. And so yeah, we just kind of met through Glasgow, really.
You were about to release your self-produced second album, Eye of the Storm, when COVID hit. Now, some bands held back on their releases that they were about to put out at the time. What made Tidelines decide to put the album out?
A mixture of a lot of things. I think we'd already announced it as coming in May 2020. We'd done a bit of promo for it. We were really keen to get it out there because our first album was 2017, so it was already it was about just short of 3 years later, and we felt that we didn't want to wait. We had the material, and in some ways, obviously COVID coming at that point was a big blow to not just to us, but to everybody in all walks of life, of course. But in some ways we were helped because, listen, we've got a really, really great fan base, and even back in 2020, they were really, really supportive, and they were, we just went on social media. We're like, look, this album's coming out. We're not going to be able to tour it. We're not going to have that traditional route of getting out and selling copies, letting you hear the songs, but we're going to try and just do it on social media. So we were basically just really present across all our social media platforms, and I think at that time, when I say it helped us, the lockdown, it hindered us in many ways. But I think the fact that a lot of our fans were just sitting in their houses locked down with very little to do but, give us goodwill by listening to what we were doing each night. We were kind of going live, and we were, as so many bands were doing, that when the album did come out, everyone sort of got around us and pre-ordered it, and that helped it in the charts.
Was that the virtual world tour? The live shows every night?
Yeah. The virtual world tour, which just seems like the most bizarre, distant memory now. But aye, that was what that was. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody was doing it. You have to do what you have to do.
Every night I was in my living room up in the Highlands in Fort William and just basically pretending I was in another mental part of the world and saying, "Oh, we're doing this amazing virtual world tour." And it was so ridiculous. But people used their imagination, and it was a good laugh.
Well, as you said, the album eventually reached number 12 in the UK album chart, which is amazing, because the band achieved that with a DIY approach without any major label backing. So that must have felt amazing.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's really. I don't need to tell you how difficult it is for an independent band, especially up here, to get into the UK charts. And so we kind of had this aim: we might try for the top 40, and we basically by the first kind of midweek that you get on the Monday, the album being released on the Friday, and then the Monday you get this midweek chart, and we were number 3, and we were like, I mean, honestly, I just fell off my seat. It was unbelievable. And so for the rest of the week, it was a case of like, look, we're obviously going to slip back every day here, but let's try and let's try and cling on as much as we can. And I thought, we'll probably fall out of the top 20, but as it happened, we just fell out of the top 10 and no more. We were finished at 12, and we were actually number 1 in Scotland, outselling the rest of the top 10 combined or something like that for that week. Of course, I mean, it's not like it was obviously we built up all the pre-orders through the goodwill of our fans and all this, and it all helped, and it was a massive boost, as you say, at a really difficult time.
So how did you celebrate?
Well, you see, we couldn't really celebrate other than the usual thing. I think we probably had a Zoom, and we just all jumped on with a load of beers and just, it was a shame because that was the one thing that we missed. And actually, in some sense, at the moment, we're about to release another album, and you kind of get apprehensive, but actually we're going to be on tour. And that'll be exciting. We get the album out, then we're with the lads, we go on tour and we can see how it goes. We'll probably be commiserating this time round, but who knows? But no, it was a really exciting point, and it was a shame because we could only see each other over a screen.
Well, the new album, An Ocean Full of Islands, is fantastic. I've been listening to it quite a lot. So how does it feel that it's eventually out in the world and you are able to, perform it in front of the fans?
Yeah, that's what's really exciting. So it's coming out on the 3rd of March, and on the very evening of the 3rd of March, we're starting our in-store where we're doing just, a couple of wee acoustic versions of the album, and then kind of meet and greets and signings and stuff. So that'll be great because we'll get an immediate reaction and a feel for how it's going down. And then by the following week, we're on our full album tour. And we've got some magic gigs lined up all over the UK for that. And then in May, over to Dublin and then Belfast. So it's, or no, the other way around, Belfast and then Dublin. So it's going to be, it's going to be such an exciting few months. And actually it's an exciting few months that we haven't had because, as you say, our last album tour came a year after the album was released. So no, it's all good.
Did you go into the recording of An Ocean Full of Islands with any preconceived ideas how it should sound and what kind of songs you wanted to write about this time?
No, and in some ways we didn't really go into the recording of An Ocean Full of Islands at all, by which I mean we didn't really sit down and record it as an album because it was, because it came off sort of the back of the last album, which, as we just touched on, was 2020. Most of it was written during lockdown. And then it was that 2021, that weird year where we weren't quite in lockdown, but we also weren't quite out of lockdown. And so a lot of the songs were passed were recorded remotely and passed as files, in between we were adding stuff. And I think pretty much every song in the album, well, not quite every song, but most of them started off life as, right, this could be a single that we could release, and we would sort of build it up. And then it wasn't until a later stage where we got into the studio together and developed them further as songs that they kind of became an album rather than just a collection of potential singles. And I think that kind of has a reflection on how the album sounds. It's quite sort of energetic and quite big, more so than our last two albums, I think. And that's why I'm really looking forward to playing it live, actually, because I think a lot of the choruses hopefully lend themselves to people singing along. And I think that's because a lot of them were written as this could be our next single. And we just kind of never ended up releasing them. We just kind of demoed them and then worked on them. And then we thought, wait a minute, let's just finish an album here. So that's kind of how it came about.
It's definitely big music in the tradition of the Waterboys and Simple Minds. You know, it really will fill a room. Definitely, I'm looking forward to hearing it in a live setting. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked those two bands there, influences on us. So that's magic to hear.
Well, the studio, didn't you buy a church that used to rehearse in the island of Mull? Was some of the album recorded there?
Yeah, the whole thing. So Ross, the keyboard player, he's originally from Benesson on the south side of the Ross of Mull, it's called, on the south of the island. And we had rehearsed way back when we did the first album there. And so now we're in the fortunate position to just have it that we can go up and work to our own kind of time zone, which is just brilliant, because that's the issue we've found over the years with getting studios down here in Glasgow, or, you know, as amazing as they may be, there's always a time pressure because time's money, you know, if you're paying by the hour. But more importantly, there's just always distractions down here, and up to Mull we could just go, well, do you know what, we're here for a week, but if we don't get the songs to where we want them to be, we could be here for 2 weeks, and that's fine. It's not a problem. And so I think that really helps the creative process. And it's such a great community out there, and also, you know, they're all really nice people, supportive people, and we enjoy kind of going for a pint and things like that after working. And then also just the natural environment that surrounds the church is just stunning. So you're kind of constantly able to get inspiration from everything that's around you.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. You know, what is there to get up to in your downtime on an island, you know, between writing and recording, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we've done everything. We've done everything from the kind of healthy stuff, going out jogs and stuff, to having probably one too many in the local pub at night, and then kind of struggling to be creative the next morning. But it's all good, and obviously Ross's family are all up there, and they'll make us feel at home as well. So no, we have some really good memories actually of the whole album process. And it's really funny actually, because people, I've said this before in a couple of interviews actually, but a lot of the locals are quite curious as to what's going on. And so, you know, we'll get like a knock at the door halfway through a vocal take, and it'll be someone popping in for a cup of tea and a chat, and it's great, because sometimes that's what you need. Sometimes you need just taken out of it and realise that let's not take it too seriously, let's just have a break and then go back to it, and all of a sudden you've got a fresh idea that wasn't there in the first place.
What has the greatest effect on your songwriting?
Oh, wow, good question. Well, lived experience, I suppose. Both melodically and lyrically, I think. Much as I would try to write a song to be a specific thing, or, you know, this is going to be one that we'll sing at a festival, or this is going to be one that'll be a hit single. If I'm not feeling like that at the time, I don't think it's too easy to do that. Or equally, if someone's like, oh, you want to write a really slow, you know, this one for the album needs to be a kind of minor, slow, sad one, and I've just been delighted by a football result or something like that, then it's difficult, you know. So I think emotions really are a big part of it, especially the very start of a song, you know, like that initial, whether it's a tiny wee bit of melody, or whether it's a lyric, but for me it's normally a melody. Then after that, once you start to build the song, I think it can become a bit more, you know, you're not that, you know, you could kind of block out the influence of what's going on around you. But at the very start, it's like, I think that, yeah, the biggest driver of what a song sounds like is just kind of what's happening in my day, that particular day that the song comes to me.
And when you're writing the songs and then you're putting the album together, do you put the album together, do you see it like as a movie with a beginning, a middle, and end?
Not this last album, because as I was saying, it wasn't really written as an album. So each track was just put together as an individual track. And I would start with the melody and most of the lyrics. And then I would go to the boys and say, look, what about this? And that's when we're sitting in the studio in Mull, and we'll knock it back and forth. And And I suppose in that sense that like each track will have the process of, you know, the beginning, middle and end. But no, the album's never really had that until a much later stage when we've maybe got 80% of the album done, and then we look at it and go, we probably need this kind of song in here, we probably need that kind of song just to make it a complete album rather than a selection of songs that just all sound similar to the last one.
The reason I ask that is because it sounds like my favourite song on the album is the song called The Last Song.
Yeah. A very, very thought-provoking name.
So, yeah, what can you tell me about that track?
Okay, well, I suppose to answer your question slightly differently, yeah, we do get to a point where we do think of the album as a structure and think beginning, middle, end, absolutely. But that point with us probably comes later than it does for a lot of bands who start writing an album before they put pen to paper, you know, on a word. So, yeah, and so the last song was one of the last songs that we completed on the record, actually. And it wasn't the whole name being the last song and being the last track wasn't something that occurred to me as I wrote the song. The lyric in the chorus is, if this is the last song we sing, I want you to know that I'm sorry. And so it was not, you know, the last song was never particularly going to be the title until we kind of laid it out and thought, you know what? When we finish the track, it's just got a particularly nice ending that once it finishes, you feel that you don't really want it. You don't want to start up again into a next track. You want to kind of sit and go, well, actually, that was quite nice. And so it became the last track of what we thought was probably going to be a running order of the album, at which point someone goes, why don't we call it the last song? Because it's in the chorus and it is also the last song. So I'm glad you like it, because it's kind of a sort of a wee quieter moment in the album, and it's kind of funny to sort of finish in a quieter moment, but I think hopefully it'll work.
No, it definitely does. I love it. I mean, you chose Written in the Scars as the lead single. What made the band decide that was the right song for us to get a taste of the new album? Yeah, so there's been, since the tail end of the summer, we've had 3 singles from the album that have been out. So the first one was Rivers in the Light, which we just thought, well, we'll get this out there get a feel to how the new material's going down. And then Written in the Scars, as you say, was a real sort of important moment, because it was just before we went on tour. We were doing a tour in the autumn called the Town Hall Tour, where we went and did sort of smaller gigs in Scotland, and similar down in England with a thing called the National Lottery Revive Live Tour, which was to support smaller venues. So we had this quite extensive tour, but in slightly smaller rooms. And we thought, right, perfect chance to just release another single from the album and start playing it. So we released that single kind of halfway through the tour, and we were playing Rivers in the Light and Written in the Scars, and yeah, both of them seemed to go down well. But I think they just sort of, Written in the Scars kind of summarises the whole album musically and lyrically. There's definitely more upbeat tracks on the album. It's certainly not like These Days, our latest single, is your sort of more like a hit single type thing. But Written in the Scars, I think it's talking about time passing and the fact that life seems to go at such a rate of knots now that sometimes you miss moments in life, and very much when you're in a band, you're touring it here, there, and everywhere, and you sometimes you sometimes forget to stop and just think, wow, this is magic. You know, we're experiencing something great here. And so that's what Written in the Scars is about. And I think there's lines in most of the songs that are kind of on that, and purely because they were written at a period in my life, again, going back to why are the songs inspired? They're inspired by what's going on in my life or what's going on in my day. And those songs were written after lockdown, when I'd gone back home to the Highlands and gone, wow, this is great. The whole world's, well, don't get me wrong, it wasn't great what was happening in the world, but there were benefits that I was in this place of kind of calmness, that the landscape I was brought up around. And I wasn't sitting up there thinking, oh, I'm missing out on what's going on in Glasgow, because I knew there was nothing going on in Glasgow. So I think that came through in Written in the Scars, it came through in Rivers in the Light, and it comes through in These Days in a different way, actually. So it probably comes through a lot of the album, and we thought Written in the Scars is a good one to sort of summarise the whole thing. Was there any particular song on the album that was really challenging to get right?
Yes. I wouldn't say because any of the songs are challenging, but just sometimes as you go through these things, you hit brick walls sometimes. I remember the track called Summer. which just seems to be like the most simple track in the album. It's just like, girl, you're looking like the summer. It's just this kind of really sort of happy-go-lucky, wee sort of catchy thing. It's no particular deep meaning or anything. And we were working at this for ages. And I'd kind of started it off with the boys, like, look, boys, this is how it goes. And I'm just sort of hitting this sort of straight 4/4 thing on the guitar. And the boys are going, I just don't know what to do with it. I don't know what, there's just something lacking. And then we started doubting maybe it was the song, it wasn't good enough. And then we worked at it for a while. And then, as I was saying about being up in Mull, someone will come in, say hello, you go away. We were outside, I think we're playing football or something. And someone came, I can't even remember who it was. Someone drove up, came out of the car, started talking to Ross, who's obviously a local, knows everyone in the community. So he was chatting away. And meanwhile, Gus and I looked at each other. I said, Gus the drummer, I said, come over here. And there was a fence post. And I'm like, the way I played it to you earlier on, I don't think that's the way I originally wrote it. But I said, I can't remember. But I said, I think it should go like this. Next thing, Gus and I are like tapping out a different rhythm on a fence post. And that was when we decided, wait a minute, we're onto something. So we went back in, changed, like just started from scratch, changed the click and changed the tempo actually, and also changed the rhythm and the drum beat, and we just basically reformed the whole track. So, I mean, it wasn't a difficult song to put together. We just made a right meal of actually putting it together.
Is there a particular song on the album that you're most connected to?
Do you know, not really, I don't think, no. I think all of them. I mean, it's funny, you write those songs and you put them together, and then once they're all there, you actually struggle to remember much about the process of doing it. So no, I think that'll maybe come as we go through the months of playing them, seeing how they go down live. There's a cracking, there's a sort of section of one of the songs that there's a wee story about that I'll probably remember the writing of it. You know, some of the songs, if you ask me where were you when you wrote that, I couldn't tell you, but one of them I've got a real memory of, I probably always will, a song called Any Heart in a Storm. And there's a strange line in the middle of it that just randomly, just suddenly goes, Lancaster, Preston, Wigan, Northwestern, somewhere down this line is a place where you're destined to be. And that was written because I was sitting on a train, the train from Glasgow to London, and I was dozing off. It was left at 6 a.m, and I was kind of lying, like my head pressed against that hard kind of plastic side of the train. I didn't have a window seat, so I'm kind of like that, and I was deeply uncomfortable, just trying to get a couple of hours of sleep. And England were playing that day in the Euros. It was a semi-final, Denmark, and every single stop was getting busier and busier with all those England fans coming on. And as a Scotsman, you can imagine just how delighted I was about that. And I'm lying there trying to get to sleep. And the tannoy was just reading out the names of the stations, obviously, all the way down. And you get to that section where it just goes Lancaster, Preston, Wigan, Northwestern. Can't remember the rest of them, but it goes all the way to London. And it kept coming Lancaster, Preston, Wigan, Northwestern, Lancaster. Of course, I got up and I thought, right, I've got it. That's got to be stuck in my head. And then by the end of the day, there was a wee tune. So that song was kind of built around that. So that'll probably always mean something to me. Every time I sing that, I'll remember those England fans piling on too. But no, it was a lot of the songs really will now take more meaning, I think, as we go on and play them live.
It's funny you say that, because that phrasing that you used in that song, it stuck out to me, and that actually reminded me of the Proclaimers. Just the way you phrased it.
Well, there's you mean is it like Bathgate no more and metal no more? Yeah.
Letter from America.
Well, it is funny because the Proclaimers, of course, being such a quintessentially Scottish band, are listing Scottish place names, and we are obviously, fairly Scottish in our approach to some things, and it is quite random that in the middle of this song we're just naming random places in the north of England. So. But yeah, that was the reason behind it.
Yeah, it's a great wee hook as well.
Hopefully, yeah. Well, we'll see. The proof will be in the pudding with that one. But yeah, we like to think so.
I want to ask you about streaming. Some bands either love streaming and embrace it, and some bands can't stand it. How do you feel about it? Do you feel it's helped Headlines at all?
Yeah, we do actually. Yeah, we're one of the bands that's fairly positive about it. I understand the reasoning behind not being, but But no, for us, it's great. It helps, Spotify and Apple. They all do their thing in terms of getting you out there and people coming across you that wouldn't have otherwise come across you. A lot of people wouldn't necessarily walk into a record store and buy your record, but they might just come across you on a playlist or whatever. So, no, it's great. And in terms of the finances of it, it's like, well, I get the point that it's obviously a great support to us when people buy the physical record. There's no doubt about that, especially for chart purposes as well. But at the same time, someone could buy your CD for a tenner and listen to it 10 million times, and you're only ever going to get that tenner. Or they might buy it for a tenner and listen to it once, and you only get that tenner. So streaming, I suppose, I know there's arguments there should be more money allocated to artists or whatever, but at least the model's there to judge how much people are actually listening to you, and then get paid for that. But yeah, that's just my thoughts. I mean, the boys in the band, we've probably all got all different thoughts, but certainly for us, it's great when people buy the physical records or pre-order it, and that helps us in the charts. But once the thing's out, listen, people streaming really, really helps us as well, and getting those streaming figures up there. So it's great, and it also gives you statistics that you can use and stuff to try and push yourself forward. So no, we're quite happy.
Yeah, and the way I use it, if I like an album and I listen to it on Spotify, I'll actually buy the physical copy every time.
Exactly. Yeah, and thankfully, we've got a lot of brilliant fans that do that. And when we ask of them to support us on a campaign pre-orders in order to chat, they all rally to the call.
What ambitions do you have for the band going forward? What would you like to achieve?
I think ideally, it's you just want to achieve being able to still do this for a living over the years, because it's such a great thing to do. We have such great fun doing it. So I'd like to think that in 10 years, maybe even 20 years' time, we're still all playing full-time as Tidelines. And whether that means we've got to take a big step forward and be playing arena tours at some point, I don't know, or whether it means we can keep going like this for 20 years. That remains to be seen. But I think that's really the ambition. We don't think too much about it, to be honest. We just think about I know I sound like a football manager saying I'm just thinking about the next game and all this, but it is a wee bit like that. You just kind of think about the ambition at the moment is just to sell as many tickets for this tour, get down, play it, hopefully chart the album in the top 40. That would be massive, and have a good summer of festivals. That's the ambition at the moment. But yeah, long term, we'd just still like to be in the game, really.
I have no doubt you'll be playing arenas down the line. Absolutely. I'd like to ask my guests the following questions, Robert. For us music fans, music is the soundtrack to our memories. What song or album, when you listen to it, brings back the best memories for you?
Oh, wow. Okay. I'll give you two. So one goes back to what we were talking about at the start of the interview, which was my taste as a young kid. And I remember one time I was on holiday and my dad bought me a Don McLean record. And obviously, as when you're a kid, you love American Pie and all that kind of stuff because it's catchy. But I just listened to it constantly and just got so into all his songs, Castles in the Air, and those kind of still big songs, but slightly lesser known. And only recently, the reason I say it brings back memories is only recently I was on a flight from Frankfurt Airport with the boys in the band. We're coming back from a gig in Germany. And I just downloaded a Don McLean album onto I did download it because it was for the plane. And I hadn't listened to Don McLean in years, and he was doing a version of The Mountains of Mourne, the old Irish song. And I'm sure you'll know it. Yeah. And I'd never heard it before. But it was just his voice, his delivery, his guitar, and all of a sudden I was back to being a child again, listening to that like listening to Vincent and listening to those. And his Buddy Holly every day, Don McLean does that different version of it, and it was just that, so that really transported me. So that's one album just recently that really took me back. Another one that I was going to say more in terms of that was on that was a recent memory, but it was of an older memory, if you get what I mean. But a more recent memory was I would always say Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run album, because I only kind of, strange thing to say because I'm such a massive fan of his, but I only sort of discovered him when I'd gone to uni, and I started listening to him, and then he was playing at Hampden, and I just kind of started getting into him, went along to the Hampden gig, was really inspired by that, and then when his autobiography came out, I bought that Born to Run, same title as the album, but just Thunder Road's probably my favourite song ever written. And I think the lyrics in that inspire so many memories for so many people. And even in, another album, The River, but the actual song, The River, obviously all about memories. And so I'll always think, every time I hear Springsteen, I get this sort of weird nostalgia, but not for my childhood, because I didn't listen to him in my childhood. It was more my sort of early days in Glasgow and the excitement of the big city. And Springsteen, all, Born to Run, you're getting out of a small town, you're, the highway or whatever that's leading you, and all those amazing Springsteen quotes that relate to that. And although they were all very Americanized in that American sense, it really related to me coming down the slightly less glamorous A82 to Glasgow, but nevertheless, I always get a nostalgia around that. So yeah, that's two examples. But I mean, there's, as you'll be the same, there's hundreds of albums that give you those memories.
Absolutely. And Springsteen, what a legend, absolute legend. And if you want to when you come to Belfast, when you're playing the Ulster Sports Club, if you do a few bars of the Mountains of Mourne, you'll leave people very happy.
That is a really, really good idea. I'm going to note that down. That is a brilliant idea.
Yeah, people will go nuts. Absolutely.
That's okay, because we do a bit of that. We now and again, if we're in a place and we know a song, a good song. I mean, I could probably, I'm one of those people that's probably got a song in my head for most place names, but I mean, like a decent song. We're down in, every time we play in the borders of Scotland, we have a great old folk song called The Rolling Hills of the Borders at some point during the set, and always goes down well. And we were in Yorkshire. We've done many gigs in Yorkshire, but we were in the Boudinelle Social Club in Leeds one night, and I can't remember what happened, but something happened on the stage to do with technology that the gig had to kind of come to a stop for about 30 seconds. And I was sort of stuck as the boys were plugging things in. I was like, oh no. And I just started singing that old Yorkshire folk song, Ilkley Maw Ba Tat, it's called, right? In my best Yorkshire accent. Probably never heard it in your life, but if you go to Yorkshire, you sing that in any pub, I guarantee you, they'll be all over you. And we did it in Leeds that night. And we had 3 gigs in Yorkshire that same tour. We had Sheffield, Hull, and Leeds, I think, and we sang it every single time because the place just went bananas. It was hilarious. So, Mountains of Mourne for Belfast, we'll remember that.
Yes, note that down. What song or album is your guilty pleasure?
Oh, gee whiz, guilty pleasure. Oh, man. Now you're asking. Oh, God.
Some people say there is no guilty pleasures, but I say, well, if you're driving down the road in a car, would you play it when the window's up or window's down?
I don't know. I used to. No, I don't want to say this as having just spoken about the Mountains of Mourne. I don't want to now be depreciative of Ireland in any way, but maybe I used to enjoy Westlife now and again. That's maybe not the most rock and roll thing. Queen of My Heart, I thought always sounded like a Gaelic song to me, so that's probably a guilty pleasure. I'm trying to think. Yeah, listen, you should hear some of the stuff we have in the band. It's in the van. It's quite eclectic, but none of it's particularly guilty. No, I mean, listen, at times I'll have the radio on, listen to Radio and Gale with Gaelic Psalms and things like that on, which I probably would put the window down. It depends on where I was, but no, I think I go with your first answer. There's no such thing as a guilty pleasure in music.
Yeah, as I always say, a good song's a good song.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, Robert, is there anything else you would like to mention before we wrap up? Anything else coming up, or any? If you want to tell people where they can get the album? Yeah, so the album's it's available for pre-order. It's all over on our website, so you can grab it there. That would be as we were talking about earlier on in relation to streaming and physical and all that. That would be a massive help. It'll then, of course, be across all streaming platforms. So check it out as much as you like, and then come and hear us. We're on tour throughout the UK we're on tour throughout Scotland, England and Wales in March, and then in May over to Belfast and Dublin, as we were speaking about, and then we've got a big show in Glasgow
on June the 23rd in Queen's Park in Glasgow. We're in a big top tent, and it's going to be really massive. It's going to be our biggest gig ever. There's going to be kind of like, it's going to start at 4 p.m. There's going to be food vendors. There's going to be bars. There's going to be, wow, a load of special guests, and it's going to be basically the biggest thing we've ever done. So that's kind of, once this tour's out of the way, it's all systems go towards that. Along with a load of other great festivals that we're looking forward to playing. But of course, that's our own kind of thing. So yeah, if you're wanting a wee night out in Glasgow, wherever you're listening, make it June the 23rd and come and hear us.
That's us finished, Robert. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark. Really enjoyed chatting to you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, good luck with the album, and I'll see you in Belfast for the Mountains of Mourne.
Spot on, Mark. If I forget, you'll need to remind me. Mountains of Mourne in Belfast.
I'll have one of them placards,
That's it.
Saying Mountains of Mourne.
Absolutely. Do you know, the very fact you're going to be there is perfect, because when I see you, I'll remember immediately. Mountains of Mourne. Excellent. We'll see you there. All
right, mate. Have a good night. Thanks very much again for doing this.
Yeah. Cheers, Mark. Thanks. Thank you. Cheers.
All right, Robert. Take it easy. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.